Okay, our next presentation shifts from pavement to buildings. It's entitled Mashomak Preserve Sustainability Strategies for Renovating in a Sensitive Ecosystem. Our presenter is Eileen Quigley.
Thank you. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Eileen Quigley, and it's my pleasure to present to you the Mashomak Preserve Sustainability Management Capstone Project. So throughout the semester, I worked with my 11 teammates here under the guidance of our faculty advisor, Suzanne DeRoche. So our task this semester was to come up with ways to sustainably renovate historic buildings. They were built in the late 1800s. But this is not your typical renovation. The buildings are located on Mashomak Preserve, which is here, and it's a 2,000-acre property that occupies roughly 1/3 of Shelter Island, and that's located on the eastern tip off the eastern tip of Long Island. As you can see here, it's surrounded by biodiversity and sensitive ecosystems, which makes this the unique aspect of this renovation. Mashomak is the site of 8 buildings, 2 full-time residents, and countless nature-loving visitors throughout the year. The buildings are used primarily to house the preserve directors, as well as summer interns, and also to hold events. Our client this semester was the Nature Conservancy, who owns the land and the buildings, but we communicated throughout the semester with the preserve directors, who are their representatives. So in January, we set out to address a multifaceted goal. The primary goal of the Nature Conservancy is to protect the immediate sensitive environment. With this renovation, they are also aiming to target fundraising, to increase the occupancy, and to further their educational mission. So we kept all this in mind when forming our own goal, which was to identify sustainable building strategies and best practices for renovating the buildings. At the same time, our recommendations are aimed to minimize the risk to the local environment. So you'll notice here that there's no mention of cost or budget, which was a unique part of this project. The client did not give us a limit on cost, so it really was great for us because it did not limit our flexibility in terms of researching the best options for Mashomak. So of the 8 buildings, the Manor House, which is here, is the largest and most widely used. It's 3 stories tall, has roughly 3,000 square foot footprint, and it's the operational core of Mashomak. It's where meetings are hosted and overnight guests stay. For example, on the top right corner, you see scientists who are regular visitors to the preserve, and they like to come and study the protected natural habitat. So it's the operational core, it's the heart and soul of Mashomak. Therefore, it became the focus of our project this semester. And as you can see, it's a beautiful, elegant old building, but that means it has the same problems as old buildings, which are it has leaky windows and doors, and it's currently operating with inefficient and outdated technologies. So therefore, our approach this semester was to reduce the impact of the building operations on the preserve. We were able to divide our research into 3 general areas of sustainability, which are water conservation and wastewater management, energy efficiency, and renewable energy. So we were able to early on come up with these 3 areas, but like any project this size, it was not without its challenges. And those are mostly operational, technical, and environmental in nature. So for example, the suggested opportunities we came up with might be inconsistent with the seasonal occupancy patterns, given that there's an influx of visitors in the summer and the warmer months. Our research was limited to the data that was made available to us, and the unique site conditions prohibited installation of certain technologies that we did want to look at. Regardless, we were able to come up with 39 viable opportunities for sustainably renovating on Mashomak. As you can see here, they can be implemented throughout the house in various locations. And this list here is the result of endless interviews with experts, lots of creative thinking outside of the box, and hours and hours of research from my teammates and myself. So as you can see, this is a lot of information. Here's that same list of opportunities divided into areas of impact, or categories of impact. So those are the prerequisites, or the first step opportunities that need to be taken or should be taken within water and energy efficiency. The next 5 are categories that are strictly environmental in nature. And the last one is a client-stipulated category that addresses their need to communicate effectively with stakeholders. So here's an example of a a water conservation opportunity. We are recommending that Mashomack install water conserving technologies in all of their buildings on the buildings on the preserve. This will impact areas of water conservation, the ecosystem, and outreach. Specifically, this would be implemented through the installation of low-flow toilets and shower heads, installing aerators on the faucets, and as well as exploring alternative methods to gardening that use only the amount of water that's necessary. So the conservation of water is a big issue on Mashomack because the preserve's only source of water is the island's aquifer. So water conservation is a big issue in order to protect the potable water they have. So here's an example of an opportunity within energy efficiency. We're recommending that they install shutters on the windows to create shading in the buildings. And the three categories that impacts are air quality, greenhouse gas emissions, and the ecosystem. Specifically, we're requesting that they put wooden shutters on the windows with operable louvers. So this will help block thermal gains as well as protect from thermal losses. The main source of heating at the Manor House is fuel oil, so this will help to reduce the need for fuel oil, which has greenhouse gas and ecosystem impacts. Additionally, the fact that the occupants can adjust the temperature manually through operating the louvers allows for comfort, and then as well as ventilation. They can open the louvers to get ventilation and have a view of the outside. So we're recommending that they take as many energy efficiency opportunities as possible first, but to address the additional need for electricity and heating, we're recommending renewable energy. So solar thermal hot water is one thing we think they should consider. This impacts four impact areas, and the way solar thermal works is it draws solar heated fluid through pipes into the house, increases the indoor air temperature much like a radiator would. Additionally, this can be connected to a hot water heater to provide domestic hot water. So this is an efficient method of harvesting the solar's energy, and it'll reduce the demand on the boiler because it would, during the times it can, it'll supplement rather than replace the need for fuel oil, but at least reduce that demand. So as you can see, it's a lot of information. We needed a way to visualize, organize, and contextualize all of it. So we came up with a graphic that helped us to figure out and understand where our opportunities fell in terms of our clients' wishes, as well as our own goals. So we looked at every single opportunity in terms of their feasibility and their environmental benefit. Here's the graphic that I just mentioned in the previous slide. And here's just a handful of our opportunities. We have done this with all of them, but this is a few from the different areas that we looked at. And as you can see, items in the top right corner have a high environmental benefit while also being relatively pain-free to execute. So we wanted to make sure we can make that visual to our client. Here are the three opportunities I mentioned earlier. So let's take a look at WCO3, which is installing water conserving technologies. It's in the top right corner, which means it has a high environmental benefit, meaning that it reduces the pressure on the aquifer, which you mentioned is a big issue on the island. And it's relatively easy to implement because it just involves installing new technologies that are relatively inexpensive. But if we, in comparison, look at WCO2, which is below it, that is implementing water conserving behaviors. So just in comparison, you can see that it has the same environmental benefit, but it's more difficult to implement and it's not as feasible because it relies on behavioral change. So in the end, our final deliverable is a feasibility report that summarizes all of the opportunities in detail along with the supporting research. So our aim is to facilitate conversation. We want the client to use the deliverable to guide their conversations with the donors to ask for the money that they think they need. And additionally, this will help their outreach mission, which is because they can engage with the community and let them know what their plans are on the preserve. And finally, they need to talk to consultants such as engineers, contractors, and architects who have the expertise necessary to carry out the plans specifically for Mashomack. Mashomack Preserve is a unique site, especially given its location to a city as large as New York City. It's one of the major cities in the world. And the fact that it is preserved to the extent it has been so far is a testament to the fact that Shelter Island locals and the Nature Conservancy it's beloved to them. And this semester, we wanted to make sure that this fact didn't waver, even as similar locations around the world are being threatened by human impact. So our sustainability strategies will help them maintain the beautiful, unique biodiversity they have, if not improve it over the years to come. So with that, I'd like to invite any questions. Yep.
What about the architectural preservation element of it? You had suggested wooden shutters. Mm-hmm. Does that go along, or who did you work with in terms of maintaining? I assume this is sort of unique, the Manor House, in maintaining those kinds of considerations.
Well, they have an architect that's located, she's based out of somewhere in the eastern part of Long Island that works specifically with them, who's done a lot of their renovations in the past. And so she does make sure that the historic part is maintained. But one of our other opportunities actually was to restore one of the old porch, which is no longer there, and it was when it was originally built in the late 1800s. So that is another, just creating a sun space with a porch is another thing we considered. But we did want to make sure that we weren't doing anything that would harm the historic look of the house. It's not necessarily protected, but it's something that we know they value. Gentleman in the green shirt.
I'm curious, this seems like a wonderful place for stargazing, and so I'm curious to what extent light pollution is discussed or is a consideration.
That actually wasn't discussed at all. It's pretty remote. You have to take a ferry to get here, so it doesn't, except for during the summers when there are people who go to their second houses out there or vacation, it's mostly just the residents, and there aren't that many on the island. So and it's close to the Hamptons, but besides that, there aren't too many sources of light pollution, so that's not something we considered. Dan?
How did you, on your environmental versus feasibility scatter plot, how did you quantify and score
It was a lot of just kind of looking at the information we had, figuring out what was the best for the specific location, looking at the way that it would, there's so many different impacts of each item and how exactly that would work with the house, and kind of just, put everything on a scale and looking at which one was more harmful than the other, and which one, ease of or feasibility took into account a little bit the cost, even though that wasn't, it's not a restriction for them, but we did look at that in order to rank it, and so they can, that kind of stuff, just in comparison with each other.
We have time for one more.
Just partially addressed my question, but I'm still curious about cost. I can't imagine anyone giving you a blank check, because as you give this back to them, and they say, well, let's look at implementing this. It's almost the first next question. What's our budget to do this? Mm-hmm. And so does this come up in your report anywhere where you talk about cost and opportunities there?
Yeah, so for every single opportunity that we've identified, we did put in a cost. In a lot of cases, it's arranged because it's going to be specific for the site. It's something only the contractor can really, or the consultant can identify for them. But it's more the way they asked us is to present kind of a menu of opportunities is what they called it, but just something that they could go to their donors and say, we know that this opportunity is going to cost this much, so we'd love to do it, please give us the money. And that was what the lack of budget was, because they don't have anything yet. So we did give them the cost so that they could kind of have an idea of where to go with it, but nothing, we didn't have to limit it to that cost, any cost.
Thanks.
Thank you.